Good afternoon, everybody. Congratulations, you've made it through nearly the whole week. We're on the last stretch here now. So I'm going to talk to you about bridging communication domains between the web and the network. So, as the title's got bridging in it, it's very important that I put an analogy which has a bridge in it as well to start this off. I'm sure everybody knows this is the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. It's a very important thoroughfare that goes north-south across the bay there, connects Marin County with the city. And it's very important. There's lots of different types of traffic there. You can bike across it, you can walk across it. You've got RVs, you've got trucks, there's lots of different traffic. So it's very important that they're able to cope and have the ability to satisfy the needs of all that different traffic. So the interoperability there. We need to keep the users of that bridge secure. We need to keep the infrastructure of the bridge secure. So they do this with lots of different physical deterrents, barriers between lanes, lights, and monitoring and detection and penalties for people that break the rules. And of course, it needs to be very reliable. This is a bridge that carries over 100,000 people a day. Back and forth in and out of San Francisco, and it needs to be a reliable connection for all the people that use that. So interoperability, security, and reliability. So if we now look at WebRTC, it's a transformative, disruptive technology, and it's going to require bridging between the network and the web world. So when we consider that, we should again look at interoperability. We need to look at the audio, video, and data interoperability characteristics that are required. We look at, we need to make sure that connectivity between our applications is secure. So we can secure it for the client and also protect the network as well and protect the applications itself. So security is important. And of course, reliability. I think one of the key points that WebRTC addresses is in the experience, the customer experience, and that's one of the values that it can really bring. So reliability of the communications channel is very important. So again, interoperability, security, and reliability. Now, as we heard yesterday lunchtime's keynote session, you can't do a WebRTC presentation without putting Dean Bubley's forecast slide up. So I'd actually taken it out, but I put it back in just because of that very point. Now, hats off to Dean for actually putting some numbers together here. It's very difficult to find in such an emerging market. But we're looking at 4.2+ billion in the next couple of years of devices that are enabled with WebRTC. That's a fantastic number, and it's going to drive a lot of uptake in this area. You consider that with 6+ billion. More traditional telco subscribers or telco enabled devices around the world today, and that's predicted to grow with the Internet of Things and machine-to-machine 10-12 billion over the next couple of years as well. So there's a vast community here already in WebRTC, and also being able to tap into the more traditional network sites as well. And we've been very lucky. We've seen a lot of demos. We've seen a lot of presentations from different companies talking about all the different types of usages that we can put WebRTC to. So if we look, things here, just the typical communication service, a web phone. Most of us will have access to voice over IP technology or some way of communicating, but wouldn't it be great if a CSP could provide you with a replica of your mobile subscription on the web or on your WebRTC client? That would be great for me when I'm traveling so much at the moment. So, typical web communication. I guess a lot of us spend a lot of time on conference calls and doing web conferencing as well. So, and WebRTC can really enhance the experience of that web conferencing by allowing you to, get the context of data sharing and the audio conferencing and the video all in one place in a very simple way. Makes the experience a lot better than some of the clunkier systems that we see at the moment. Contact centers. I believe this is a sweet spot for WebRTC, augmenting the contact centers. In fact, when we go out and speak to a lot of enterprises and customers, we can show them very quickly how you could take maybe their customer service website and just WebRTC enable it so they can have a new channel for their end customers to come in. So contact center is important. A lot of us will be remote workers as well, I guess. We get bombarded with lots of different types of information, and we need to maintain the productivity of being a remote worker. So the communication channel we have back into our customers and back into our own colleagues is important. So again, looking at WebRTC opportunities to improve the lives of the remote workers. Unified communications. We've got a good demo at the back if you want to come and see that. We've looked before, people used to define unified communications with IM, presence, calendaring, conferencing, calendar, contacts, and email. But now with bringing in voice and video into the exact same solution, that really allows you to be a truly unified communication solution. And of course, we get to industry verticals. Finance, insurance, healthcare. There's a huge area here. So there's lots of different types of use cases. Is this an exhaustive list? It's certainly not. There's far more opportunities and use cases that WebRTC can be brought to. And really, what it's doing is driving innovation. We shouldn't look at this as being a narrow set of use cases that WebRTC supports. We're really looking at this as being an enabling technology that allows developers out there to really use their imaginations and drive innovation. Communication is no longer the service, is no longer the app. Communication is now just part of wider business value that we can take to our customers. And we're a vendor, we're a software vendor. We provide the enabling technology here. And one of the things that drives us as we're looking at our requirements is making sure that we can make it as easy as possible for the end developers to focus on their job. And their job is there to look at the business value, come up with the innovative ideas. And so we need to remove as many barriers as we can to allow them to focus on that business value. So, how many of you think that the dominance of WebRTC is going to be in a web-only model? Is there anybody that thinks that that's the way that that's going to go? Or do we have more of a belief that there's going to be a need to connect to the traditional networks? Didn't see a hand up for either, but from my perspective, I think we're seeing a lot of adoption now, and most of the use cases there today are looking at bridging across into traditional networks as well as the WebRTC domain, and that's something I think we're going to see going forward. But there's certain challenges that we need to address if we're going to bridge between those worlds. And also, when we start to look at some of those challenges, we realize that not only are they applicable when we're talking about bridging domains between the web and the network, but some of the services that are provided in that bridging technology also are applicable when we're talking web only as well. So let's look at some of the challenges that people face with WebRTC today. One of the approaches that we could take is a simple gateway, point A to point B. Simple gateway mediating the signaling and transcoding the codecs. This is an approach that we've seen pushed out there. But it's my belief that we actually need something more than just the gateway. We need something that adds value and adds services that take some of the problems that the developers face away from them and provide a more sophisticated solution. So, in the real world, it's far more complex. We look at, a simple bridge versus a complex intersection, and that's really what we're talking about. We've got different lanes, different traffic sizes, different speeds, all going, and we need to be able to address this more complex scenario. So some of the challenges we see around interoperability. Well, of course, the network, the NAT challenge. Luckily, I was involved in SIP standards before, and NAT came late to that, and we missed the boat a bit. I'm glad to see WebRTC has implemented that as from the core. But NAT challenge is still, it's table stakes for the developers, but there's still a lot of challenges there, even with iStun and Turn in the network and the way it's implemented. I was having a very interesting conversation with Carol, who'll be presenting later on from the Institute of Illinois Technology. And they've got a very important setup in their lab where they've got multiple stacks of different NATs and different firewalls, and they test out the different scenarios. So there's a lot of challenges still to be there in interoperability around NAT traversal. And of course, basic connectivity into the different networks, the PSTN, the IMS architectures, that's still a challenge. The browser and the media incompatibilities that we see today, that's got to be overcome. And of course, freemium isn't going to be the only model that we see with WebRTC. We're going to need to actually make money out of it at some point. So people are going to need integration into charging. And with charging, you're typically looking at integration into policy as well at the same time. So you can affect and charge for the different types of quality of service and different traffic profiles that you see. And security. Again, it's really good to see that WebRTC has focused so much on security and has built that into the standards. There's some good tracks and good discussions going on yesterday. But there are areas around identity management that we need to look at. The ability to do network level protection, network level authentication is something that has to be addressed currently by the end developer. Putting in protection for denial of service. That's a problem that the application developers have to face at the moment, and I think they would be better off focusing on the business value themselves and looking at that problem to be solved for them. And all traffic is treated the same. And in the previous session, we were talking about compliance and regulation coming in. We're going to have a scenario where we are able to prioritize some traffic over the other, maybe for emergency calling, etc. And reliability. So this is, I think, as I said before, the key sweet spot for WebRTC is enhancing the customer experience. And a customer experience, the expectations of customers around customer experience are getting greater all the time. So if we're looking at communication sessions that can be cut by potentially somebody just refreshing a browser or moving from 3G to 4G or 4G into Wi-Fi, and that interrupts that communication flow, well, that's going to be a problem. That's really going to diminish and take away all the advantages we have around the reliability and the customer experience. So, of course, with this, the app has no control. This is a problem. Once it's inside the browser, it's got no control on what's happening in the network. So we need to put some things in there that can overcome this challenge. So how should we address that? How should we address those challenges? Should we wait? Should we let the standards try and catch up and make sure that we get wide adoption of the same codecs and look at it that way? Should we leave the onus on the end developer? So that when you're developing the app, you have to take care of security, interoperability, reliability, identity, authentication. Should that be the responsibility of all WebRTC developers out there? Do we not think these are necessarily problems, because quite a lot of them are associated with bridging into the network? And maybe that's not the focus for WebRTC. Maybe we should be looking at the web-only model. Well, to me, we really shouldn't leave it up to the developer. We should take all those on head on. We should address the problems we've got today. We should remove the barriers away from the end developers. And we should focus on the ability to connect between domains where that's applicable. So to do that, we need to have a real-world enabling architecture that we can put into place that addresses interoperability. So enforces the disparity of different types of network signaling protocols we've got out there and the different codecs that are there. Being able to connect into specialized equipment like media servers for recording or for conferencing. Being able to tap into identity services. So being able to set up a solution where you use OAuth, which is one of the main authentication service protocols that are out there, or standards that are out there, to authenticate and identify the end user, but also then tap into the network identity as well. So if you want some applications that are looking for strong identity and you want to use the network side of things, to be able to tap into that. And also then to be able to use both types of authentication at the same time. So Alice comes in and authenticated by Facebook, Bob's come in and authenticated in the network. We want to make sure that they can talk together and get away from some of these closed, walled-gardened ecosystems that are there. And then the reliability. I gave you the example before of handoffs between different networks cutting or interrupting the communication flow. So we need to have something in the enabling architecture that allows us to store session state and do rehydration when that happens. The end user doesn't want to get involved in that. We want to make sure that that happens automatically within the network. This could also then be extended as well and look at rehydration when you actually want to change between multiple devices. So if you want to go, you spend a lot of time on your mobile coming in using your WebRTC application. You've come into the office, you want to switch the same session with exactly the same context of data and communication session onto another device once you're in the office. So being able to do that and have that handoff capability with the network is something that's important. And being able to optimize the path of the media within the network to make sure that it spends as little time as possible on unmanaged networks so that you can get as best a quality of service as possible is something that we need to have within the enabling architecture. So, there's lots of different terms being bandied around. WebRTC Service Enabler. We've seen the 3GPP specifications coming out and starting to specify different nodes decomposed across the architecture. But as long as they encapsulate the types of requirements, I really don't mind what they call it. But it has to be more than a simple gateway going between signaling, conversion, and media transcoding. It really has to add value for the end developer as well. So if you look at some of these, again, in a little bit more detail, look down at the media path, having intelligent media path selection. So the ability to do dynamic anchoring and de-anchoring of media. So let's take a scenario where Alice calls Bob. They're having a good conversation, and they realize that a bit of information they need is with Doug. So they want to conference Doug in. So they set that up, they conference, they're in a three-way conference, they're having a good old discussion. Now, they get all the information they want, and Doug's a very busy man. So Doug goes back off to do what he was doing before, and the communication drops back down to being just a two-party. Now, in most solutions that are out there at the moment, you would then end up tying up that media server resource for the duration until the call is teared down. What we need to do is when the media has gone back to just being a two-person, we need to switch it back to being peer-to-peer and release that expensive network resource. So that's important for a lot of the network providers out there. We need to be able to do highly scalable codec transformations. And this is going to be important. When WebRTC starts to get to critical mass, there's going to be huge scalability that's needed. So within the media path, we need to be able to scale very rapidly and very elastically at that level. And of course, we talked before about NAT and STUN, and the ICE protocol. That's table stakes, but it needs to be there. It needs to be within the service enabler to be able to support that solution. We need to have capabilities for enhanced services. I gave you the example of the multi-party, dynamic multi-party calls before. So we can do the optimized resourcing, utilizing your network very efficiently. And then also when we get down to compliance and regulatory, as these applications become more mainstream and they're used in the financial industry or they're being requirements that are brought on from regulation, we need to be able to integrate and interoperate with recording devices, for example. I was looking on the news last night, and it's been announced in the UK that Google, Facebook, and Twitter traffic is now being classified as an external communication in the UK. And so it's now open to be tapped without any kind of warrant. And I think that's going to happen to a lot more different types of communication, certainly with WebRTC as well. So this will be important. Identity authentication and protection of both the client and the end network is important. I talked to you before about the web and the enterprise authentication, being able to support typical enterprise technologies like LDAP, being able to support web authentication technologies like OAuth, being able to support the network identity, being able to mix and match all those identity services together to provide one communication solution. Being able to coordinate session across multiple devices when your identity is used to log in on multiple devices. To protect the end client and the network from denial of a service attacks and DDoS attacks is very important as well. And to provide that traffic prioritization aspect. So a lot we can do around security as well within the network, taking the onus off the developer. And reliability. We need to have that solution within the network that can perform that rehydration I was talking to you about before. So when I go from my 3G to my 4G, we can rehydrate the session. If the end user accidentally, whilst multitasking a web conference, navigates away from the tab and kills that communication session, we can set it back up with exactly the same context we had around data and communication before. So provide a rehydration capability within the network. And provide that so that we can have mobility across multiple devices as well. And quality of service. Provide that reliability so that my experience of my call between the two parties is enhanced. So minimize the amount of time that is spent on an unmanaged network. So I think one of the architectures that we can propose for doing this is a decomposed. It matches very much with what 3GPP are talking about. Having a decomposed signaling and media handler so that you can centrally control the signaling but push it through a media handler that is actually closest or in the most optimal path that's there. And look towards SDN and network function virtualization to make sure that we can be elastic in the way that we design these architectures and can bring them up and down as scale and performance demand. So those are some of the challenges and some of the approaches I believe we need to take to solve them. We need to really take the burden off the WebRTC developers. We need to provide them with an infrastructure that supports interoperability, provides the security, and gives the reliability of experience for the end developer. We need to do that for them. We need to do that so we can support the innovation, the promise of WebRTC, which is to deliver innovation across communication. So we need to take the barriers away from these developers and give them a solution that allows them to drive this into new areas. So with that, I'll stop there. I hope you've been enjoying your lunch while I've been talking. But we've got time for questions if we have any. The fish and chicken are too attractive, are they? Well, final advert then. We've got the booth down the end there. We've got some interesting demos around some of the capabilities and some of the barriers that we were talking about there and how we've overcome them. We've got our unified communication demo as well and a healthcare demo. So please call down and see us. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and safe travels back to wherever you're from.